February. I'm Rachel. I'm one of the Deputy Controllers for Auckland Emergency Management, and I'll be providing you this briefing this afternoon. I have quite an impressive lineup of colleagues alongside me today, and I might actually, because they probably go out of shot, I might introduce them as I bring them up to speak. So they will be giving various updates on their respective areas of work, which I will introduce when I get there. I just really wanted to start, though, this afternoon's briefing just by acknowledging that we have had an incident out at our Whetau Peninsula as a result of a slip which has impacted a property, and Ron Devlin, our Regional Manager of Fire and Emergency New Zealand, is going to speak a little bit more about that, but I just wanted to really extend my thoughts and sympathy to those involved with that event, but also others who have been impacted by this storm and flood event since Friday of last week. So just an overview now of weather and how we're tracking and the latest information that I have. So heavy rain and winds have eased, currently no watches or warnings in place, and isolated showers and potentially thunderstorms are still possible during the period of 12 p.m. and 8 p.m. today, but mainly in the west, including the Piha area. I can certainly say it was quite nice to look out the window just before and see a little bit of blue sky out there. It feels like it's been a while since we've had that. We expect showers on Thursday afternoon with more in the evening, easing Friday morning and clearing from midday. We don't expect any significant coastal impacts due to modest tides. The additional heavy rain this morning has caused surface flooding in many areas, and it caused road closures, both sort of soft and hard, those that will need more enduring efforts to reopen them, and some restrictions were in place. The rain and wind also gave us some more property damage, which I think Ron will probably cover off. Bus and train services have been further disrupted today, with road closures still having a big effect across the roading network, both in private and public transport. So again, that message there before you head out on your journey to really check the state of the roads that you plan to travel on. I've been saying this repeatedly, but it is quite a dynamic situation in terms of, sort of the roading network as repairs are undertaken. Since the flood event on Friday, we've had 612 flood damaged cars removed from the roading network, with still another 194 cars to be collected. Just that gives you a bit of a context of I guess, how things played out on Friday evening. I'm now going to hand to Ron Devlin. So Ron, as I mentioned, is the Regional Manager of Fire and Emergency New Zealand, and he's just going to give us an update on their response over the early hours, mainly the early hours of this morning when we did have that heavy rain come through, and also some of the work that they've been doing throughout today to look after our communities. Thanks, Ron.
Thank you, Rachel. Te kora katoa. Good afternoon, everybody. Ron Devlin, Region Manager, Fire and Emergency. Look, yes, that's right. So the weather that came through last night was nowhere near as extensive as we thought, and therefore it was a quieter evening. We had around, up until about lunchtime today, we had around about 90 calls, of which 57 of them were emergency calls and were dealt with accordingly, and have all been dealt with to date. Fire and Emergency is in a business as usual state now. That is that we are dealing with everything as we would normally. We still have 3 urban search and rescue teams here, but we have withdrawn our urban search and rescue teams back from Northland, where we had positioned them overnight because of the risk of weather there, which of course did not eventuate. Thank goodness for that. What I would like to just touch on, though, was the event that happened in Whetau Peninsula around 12:02 this afternoon. Whetau Appliances, that is on the Whetau Peninsula in Orua Bay, just on the southern peninsula of the Manukau Heads, for those that are quite unaware of where that is. The Whetau station turned out to a collapse on Orua Bay Road. On arrival there, they found a property had crashed down the bank onto the beach. There was 2 people injured and a person unaccounted for in the property, and turned out to be trapped. All 3 people were injured. Fire and Emergency responded with the assistance of helicopter and airport rescue hovercraft. responded geotech engineers, urban search and rescue technicians, and others to assist and effect a rescue. This was done. All persons have now been rescued, with 2 of them being removed to Middlemore Hospital for checks. It was a really well-coordinated event and a well-coordinated response, both from obviously Fire and Emergency, New Zealand Police, the Awhitu and the Waiuku Brigades, St John Helicopter and the Auckland International Airport Rescue Team. So it's been, all in all, a really well-effected rescue. It was a particularly difficult and highly technical, as the trapped patient was actually about a metre below the tide line with an incoming tide. So you can imagine the difficulties that rescuers had in effecting that. However, they set about their task, and we had that completed within about 40 minutes. So all are safe now, and those that require it are in hospital. So we will continue to do what we do, and we would ask that the public, you have an emergency, please ring 111. If it's a flooded basin or whatever, then I think you can probably direct that through Auckland Emergency Management, as you have been, and we will respond accordingly. So thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you, Ron, and like I said, thoughts with those involved this morning, but also throughout the last couple of days and moving forwards. I'm now going to pass to Ian McCormick. So Ian's our General Manager Building Services, and Ian's going to give you an update on the work that his team have been doing out assessing the condition of buildings across the region, both those that are residential dwellings and also commercial premises. So I'm just going to pass now to you, Enos.
Kia ora. Today we've deployed over 95 rapid assessment teams across Tamaki Makaurau. They're comprising 190 building inspectors and compliance staff from Auckland, supplemented by over 25 staff from other BCAs, including Hamilton, Tauranga, Otahuonga, Wellington, Christchurch, Dunedin, Kaingaora, with support from Fire and Emergency Services, urban search and rescue teams from across the country, and also one of our contractors, professional building consultants. We're expecting additional resource to be arriving over the next couple of days from Queenstown, Whangarei, Kapiti Coast, Waimakariri, and also from the BC ITOs, a number of staff coming through. So we are ramping up the pace of our assessments and through putting more teams into the field. To date, we've issued 168 reds, 687 yellow placards, and 1,440 white placards as of 14:36 hours. So we're currently tracking at around about 700 to 1,000 assessments per day, and our aim is to complete most of these assessments by the end of the week. We're deploying all of the resource that we can for this important work to enable occupants of homes to understand the risks associated with their flood damaged building, and also the use of those buildings reflects the risks associated with the damage they've incurred. We're currently looking at probably what is the largest deployment of rapid building assessment exponents since the Christchurch earthquake emergency. This deployment is only possible by the support we've had from our partners. We've also obtained a designation under the Building Act. This designation will allow us to continue to use those building assessment powers after the conclusion of our local emergency, whenever that is. That will enable us to provide support to affected building owners and occupants through and beyond the local emergency. We also reflect on the important support we've had from our construction industry, which we continue to receive. Because of this large deployment of building inspections officers onto this important work, it means we no longer continue to provide the same level of building inspection services as we had. As a result, we've now extended our restriction on non-essential building consent related inspections, and this restriction has been extended to Tuesday the 7th of February. All inspections that were scheduled to this date are being and will be cancelled. Our staff are ringing up people who have booked inspections over that period and advising them of cancellation. Where there are essential inspections required, our customers should email our inspection inbox, and we provided on our website details of what that address is. And when we're ringing up customers, we're advising them about that address. Those essential services are related to welfare services, medical, emergent response, and critical infrastructure such as supermarkets, or those required to prevent or resolve risk to life and property. Now, we recognise how disruptive this booking restriction will be for our industry, which in many cases would have already suffered setbacks from flood damage. It's important that we continue to prioritise the identification of unsafe buildings to safeguard the public and enable the recovery process. That is our focus. Moving forward, our inspection booking portal will be open to book or rebook inspections from 0800 hours on Thursday the 2nd of February, 4 periods from Tuesday the 7th of February onwards. Thank you.
Thank you, Ian. So now we're going to shift to some information focused around health and wellbeing. And we're really fortunate this afternoon to have Dr. Jay Harawa, Medical Officer of Health with the Northern Region for Te Whatu Ora, to give us an update on staying healthy while cleaning up your property and also the psychosocial support that's available. And with Dr. Jay is Dr. Rawiri Jansen, who's the Chief Medical Officer, Te Whai Ora, to give a perspective on Māori public health. If the two of you would like to come up together or stand side by side.
Kia ora koutou, good afternoon everybody. As noted, my name is Dr. Jay Harawa and I'm a Medical Officer of Health for Te Whatu Ora Northern Region. I'm here today representing Auckland Public Health, and as noted, I'm with Dr. Rawiri Jansen, who's the Chief Medical Officer for Te Whai Ora. I think the first message we'd like to say to the community is that our hospitals, our after-hours services and our primary care services remain open and available to provide ongoing care to our community. If there are people that have issues with regards to being able to travel to those services, we recommend that in the first instance you talk to your provider. It is entirely possible that you may be able to have a virtual consultation. Also note that Healthline are often able to provide some individual preliminary advice, and that number is 0800 611 116. We are here today to talk around the public health risks around contaminated floodwaters, how you can keep yourself safe and prevent those risks, both physically and mentally. There are many public health risks from contaminated floodwater. We think it's safe to assume that any floodwater you may come into contact with is contaminated. So those contaminants are the likes of runoff from farms that we've seen, potentially other hazardous materials, and probably of most significance, contamination with human sewage. In terms of prevention and any clean-up processes, so obviously the most important thing you can do to prevent any risk from contaminated floodwater is to not have any contact with it, and we're asking that people will avoid that where possible, and including ensuring that children don't paddle in any contaminated floodwaters. If you do happen to have any contact with floodwaters, like I say, it's safe to assume that it is contaminated, and the thing that we would ask people to do is afterwards ensure that you're cleaning your hands thoroughly. So that's washing and drying with warm soapy water for at least 20 seconds and ensuring that your hands are perfectly dry afterwards. We absolutely want people to do that if they've been in contact with floodwaters and they are, after they go to the toilet, and especially if they're preparing food. In terms of cleaning up, if you've been unfortunate to be impacted by the contaminated floodwaters, there is some detailed advice around how you can go about this safely on the Auckland Emergency Management website, and there's also information on the Auckland Regional Public Health website too. The most important thing really is, as soon as it's safe to do so, to clean up, drain and dry your house as quickly as possible. Take out everything that is wet and can be moved, and disinfect all items that are able to, and all surfaces that the floodwater may have come into contact with. Once the weather eases, and it is looking a little bit better just this afternoon, take the opportunity to open up the home to allow the ventilation and to allow your home to dry out as much as possible. It's really important to assess if there have been any food or surfaces that have been in contact with contaminated floodwater. If at all in doubt, assume that the food has been contaminated and it is no longer safe for human consumption. We're asking that people do that even if the food may have been a container. We know things have been moving around, containers may get spilled, seals may be broken. Like I say, best to be safe in this aspect. We're also asking that people shouldn't eat any garden produce if there's been floodwaters across those surfaces. And lastly, just if you are unfortunate to be having to clean up your property, try and reduce the risk to yourself by wearing closed shoes, gloves and a mask if you have access to one. And I'll just hand over to my colleague, Dr. Rowan Jansen.
Kia ora tātou. Tēnei paku mihi kia koutou. Nā kaimahi I roti nā ratonga hauora, ngā ratonga hāpori, koutou whakapaukaha ana te tiaki nei I ngā whānau I ngā hāpori. Kia ora, I'm Rawari McCree-Jansen, I'm Chief Medical Officer for Te Ako Whaiora. I want to open by thanking everybody in the health services and community services who have done so much to look after whānau and communities. We noticed that the hospitals are open and services are running, despite the fact that many of you have been affected in terms of being able to get to work, but our mihi to you, so thank you. Just want to endorse what Dr. Nzherald was saying. Contact with floodwater can be a risk. If you've been in contact with floodwater, would like you to pay attention to the risk of gastroenteritis, the tummy bugs or skin infections. So diarrhea or vomiting, different whānau will be more at risk of that, the very young, the very old and those who are vulnerable. If you get symptoms, you need health advice, you should reach out to your primary care team, your GP or your nurse practitioner, or if you need to ring Healthline 0800 611 116. And then finally from me, just thinking about mental well-being, we appreciate that for many people this disruption and displacement has been an incredible toll emotionally. It's important that we take time to notice that. If you need help with anxiety or distress or stress, you can reach out to whānau and friends, but also to your primary healthcare team, your GP or your nurse practitioner. Many of those services have counsellors available, health coaches, health improvement practitioners, and they stand by ready to support you. So it's understandable if you're worried or stressed, if you're confused or if you're distressed, and the key message is if you need help, reach out and get it. Kia ora tātou.
Kia ora. Thank you. Some really important messages there, and I'd just really like to acknowledge that I was driving in this morning and heard someone just talking about their anxiety sort of heading into last night's weather, and obviously it's great to see that we've got some blue skies now, but if anyone is struggling, a really good reminder that there is help out there and to reach out via the channels that have just been outlined, but also through the helpline that we've got available, 0800 22 22 00. I'm now finally going to pass over to Roger Ball, who's our Director of Civil Defence and Emergency Management with our National Management Emergency Agency, just to give us that all of country kind of emergency management picture. And then I'm going to finish off with just a couple of pieces of information about other services or things people should be thinking about before we end this briefing. Thanks, Roger.
Thanks, Rachel. Tēnā koutou katoa, Roger Ball from NEMA. Well, as the Auckland Controller indicates, the situation in Tamaki Makaurau is improving today, and that is a sort of a general picture that we're seeing across the North Island. A number of warnings and watches do remain in place, and they're on the Met Service sites. You can see those there, but our sense is that the risk is decreasing as we go through the day. This morning, the Northland Civil Defence Emergency Management Group were able to terminate their declaration of emergency and stand down their activated Emergency Coordination Centre. And as this goes through the country, I know that the other Civil Defence Emergency Management groups are keeping a close eye and monitoring this weather. While we still have a declaration of emergency in place in Auckland, and it's here until Friday, and a decision will need to be made by the group after that, the National Emergency Management Agency will continue to operate its bunker, its National Coordination Centre, from below the Beehive. We're doing that in order to ensure that national resources are coordinated and that all requests for assistance that are coming through from Auckland are dealt with in a timely manner, and we're working with and have the full cooperation of government agencies across the board. We're working with emergency responders such as FENZ, police, ambulance services and health, but also those big government agencies that are delivering a lot to assist the public, NZDF, MB, MSD and many others. I just want to also encourage the public that although we've got this respite maybe in front of us and a slightly more settled picture over the weekend, please do take the opportunity to have those conversations around the table with your flatmates, your neighbourhood this weekend about your readiness and preparedness for emergency events in your neighbourhood. Flooding is our number one most frequent emergency event in Aotearoa, New Zealand, and it's not necessarily always the most severe, but you can see from what's happened in Auckland that it can have really major consequences. We'd have to think back to Kaikoura earthquake and Canterbury earthquake event to see another disaster event of such magnitude, whereby, and what I mean by magnitude is the resources that are now being deployed, the cost of it, and the effort that is being poured in from around the country and around our system in order to help Auckland respond to, and then as we go forward to recover from this event. So please, we ask the community to also continue to play its part, and we thank you for your efforts so far. Kia ora, thanks Rachel.
Thanks, Roger. So just moving on through a couple of other pieces of information for people. So just as the weather improves, we do expect changes to the civil defence and evacuation centres that have been stood up. But I just want to remind people that centres are still open at Mangere, Ramwick Park, Albany and Kelston, and they will continue to have wraparound support during the daytime to help people, and also accommodation overnight if people have been displaced by the storm event. We know that there are people that have been reaching out to us for help, and in some cases we may not have got back to you yet. I just want to assure you that we will be in touch if you've done that. A slightly different aspect of this event is things like we've heard today from one of the large lift and escalator operating companies that there are a number of lifts and escalators in buildings across Tamaki Makaurau that are out of action due to interaction with water. And so, you know, that has the impact, you know, there's a range of ways that can impact people. So high-rise buildings, multi-storey apartments, you know, people that may need to access different services where typically they've relied on a lift or an escalator service and they can't do that. So if you're in a situation where you are in a building or need to get to a service where you're not able to access it because a lift or an escalator is out, then again, just want to encourage you to get hold of us on 0800 22 2200 because there is support available for people that are having difficulty accessing services. Please don't stay home stuck on your high-rise building floor without being able to access things. If you need to, do get in touch with us. Want to really thank, on behalf of Auckland Transport, Aucklanders' efforts to stay off the roads. So we had 20% less traffic on the roads today. As of this point in time, some slips and cleanups will take considerable time to clear safely, such as Scenic Drive out west, which has 4 significant slips, and we currently have 34 roads down or closed or significantly impacted in some way. That's down from a total of 82 on Friday, so making good progress there, but ongoing disruption. Please take extreme care when travelling. Due to the unprecedented events of the past few days, I'm also advised that Auckland Transport has authorised the waiver of all infringement notice issued between the period of 2 p.m. on Friday the 27th of January and 9 a.m. this morning. If you are cleaning up your flood damaged property, please take photos of the damage. So this really relates to your ability to claim insurance. So if you do have insurance and you've been affected by the events over the last couple of days, really important that you just check in with your insurance provider, particularly if you've had impacts on Friday and then impacts again overnight, because they may be treated as two separate events which might need you to have a different record of information. So just encouraging people, take photos of anything that's been damaged in your property, try and check in with your insurance provider to find out what information they need from you before you get into things too far. But if you do need to start removing things because it's a sanitation or a health issue, then a good advice there is to take plenty of photos and keep a good record. Schools. This will be welcome news, I think. By many, schools can now open from Thursday, and schools will provide specific updates to their own communities. So parents, students, look to your usual channels for information about your school's operating arrangements. And lastly, businesses affected by the flood event can check Tātaki Auckland Unlimited's website for links to external resources and support options that are specifically focused around supporting businesses. So more information on that's at aucklandunlimited.com. A business support helpline is being operated by the Employers and Manufacturers Association. It's for business owners affected by the severe weather conditions, and you can call 0800 500 362 for that information, and it covers things like staff leave, paying employees, insurance, etc. And I think that's where I'll leave our update for this afternoon. I think we've got some time for a few questions.
Yeah, that's all right. I have a question on behalf of a colleague. A lot of Aucklanders have expressed their frustration at the council's, quote, slow response to fixing issues around the city. What's your response to that?
My response to that would be that this has been an unprecedented event. When we look at the scale and distribution of buildings, road networks, our wastewater, our stormwater infrastructure that's been affected, it really just shows that we haven't had an event like this before. Huge geographic diversity and impact across the full range of utility services that we offer. We've had crews out working tirelessly since Friday to try and restore all of those various services, and they've made fantastic progress. So, whilst I can appreciate that people may be frustrated where there are still some outages in areas, great progress has been made, and really just ask for people's patience. People are working hard, doing long hours, and I think all of us want to, serve you the best way we can.
You've said rate is supposed to ease over the next couple of days. What's the likelihood of more slips or flooding over the coming days?
Well, that's a good question. I think the likelihood of more flooding, given the forecast is not predicting too much rain for us, is probably much lower. But given the sodden ground conditions, that sort of ground instability issue is still a possibility. So, I think in terms of sort of being able to walk away from having any effects out on the ground, we're not quite there yet. We could still see some things like tree fall and land subsidence over the next couple of days. So, we will be keeping an eye on that and a level of vigilance and response if needed.
Schools will be heading back tomorrow. Is that something that the council is supportive of, given there is still quite a bit of damage out there on the roads and in suburbs?
Well, look, the decision around schools' operating hours is one for the Ministry of Education. Our role in any decision that they take is really the provision of information so that they can make an informed decision about what is best for their school communities.
Could you give us a bit of context about how busy your teams have been last night?
I can tell you that we have had staff physically on duty overnight and right throughout the day. At the moment, I think upstairs we've got over 100 staff working on this response across a range of different functions, and that doesn't include the range of staff that are out in the field. Just talking to Auckland Transport this morning, they have 500 people out scoping the road network to try and identify, roading issues. Of course, we don't sometimes know about roading issues until someone comes across them, so they're taking that proactive response of getting out there and doing those checks, as we are for all range of other services, our parks, our wastewater networks, our stormwater drains. There is a lot of activity happening, and certainly, overnight with the alerts that we had and the warnings in place, a fully manned presence was here.
If the weather does ease over the next couple of days, is there a chance that state of emergency might be dropped in Auckland before Friday?
The plan is to, of course, review the state of emergency. So the declaration that we have at the moment lasts until Friday evening. And I do just want to take this time, it's an opportunity, I guess, just to clarify, the intent or why we do those declarations. It gives us additional tools that we might need during a response, and often those tools are very much in support of our emergency services. So, for example, where we might need to enforce an evacuation, or where we might need to put restrictions on the use of a road or coming back into an area. So we don't take that decision lightly. We really try and leave it until we know that it's something that we're going to need. And it stays in place at the moment until it either expires or we extend it. We'll be giving some advice on that on Friday morning, and expect a decision then. It may be, given that we still, whilst the weather is improving, but things are still fairly sodden out on the ground with potential for further issues, the slips are a good one, that we may need to still have access to some of those powers, just to make sure that we can respond where necessary. But that will be advised in due course.
Just one more question. News Hub earlier sent through some specific complaints from specific addresses. Do you have a response to that? Or
I haven't seen those complaints, no, sorry.
Just lastly from me as well, how much longer do you think emergency centres will be up and running for, with quite a few people having nowhere else to go?
Well, the focus for us at the moment very much is working to place people that are currently in our civil defence centres into temporary accommodation. So the civil defence centres are really stood up to provide that sort of first port of call for people that have been, have had to been evacuated from their residence and have nowhere to go. We don't want people staying in there long term. We want to find them some alternative. For many people, it may be days, it may be weeks or months that they're going to need that sort of support. So our focus at the moment is working hard to find accommodation beyond the civil defence centres for those people that fits in with their needs.